All right, you insisted that I do something Christmassy. Merry Christmas, Damien. How are you, mate?
Good, Rob. Merry Christmas to you, buddy. I know you're not a big fan of it, but hey, you got to love the holidays.
We're going to get into the holiday spirit. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to debrief a forced landing. This guy did a great job getting his aeroplane on the ground, keeping it in one piece, but most importantly, he kept himself in one piece. So let's throw straight to the video without further ado, and I'll hit the play button so we can have a look, and we'll pause this as we go and debrief as we go, but let's watch the video in its entirety.
Or Cessna 117 Tango Sierra, about 9 miles to the southeast, requesting full stop, have hotel.
So everything seems to be going ops normal there as he's approaching the airport. Then he has a pretty significant drop in RPM.
Cessna.
Right down. 2.
Concord Tower, Cessna 117 Tango Sierra, I'm identing. I'm losing my engine.
Who says having engine trouble?
Cessna 117 Tango Sierra. I'm sputtering in and out and losing power. I've pulled carb heat. Everything else is in the green. Looks like my oil pressure has dropped.
All right, well, you can proceed direct to the runway 117 Tango Sierra, clear to land, and I'm ready for you.
Okay, it's coming back and I'm losing it, and I'm over a residential area. I don't have a lot of places here. I have pitched for altitude.
Okay, roger that.
What did he miss there? Let's debrief it as we go. What did he miss so far?
His emergency checks. He's just had a quick scan and gone, everything's in the green, but he hasn't actually done any emergency checks at all. If you're having issues with your engine, it's usually 3 things that could be missing. Fuel.
Yep.
Spark. So magnetos or your plugs are fouled. And you need air. So you'd assume that if you're getting plenty of air, so I'd be looking at my fuel and checking that I've actually got enough fuel, because he actually remarks about how the engine is kind of surging or spluttering, if you like, and you can see in the footage too that the RPM or the tacho is sort of fluctuating up and down. So that's as it's still getting some fuel in the lines, it's firing and it's surging. So you've got spark. Unfortunately, I'd say fuel's got to be an issue on this one. That has a whole gamut of things that, from a flight instructor's point of view, that there's been some certain things that have been missed prior to the flight.
Let's not nitpick why it's happened. So it's happened. So he's going through it. Let's come back to that at the end. Let's see what he's missed here, because the whole reason I wanted to do this video with you was so people that are watching that are student pilots or even experienced aviators can see what was missed there. I think the biggest thing for me was he didn't have a procedure that he would go through, as you say. Like he didn't point. I don't know about you, Damo, but when I learned to fly, the instructor told me to point at things, look at the instruments, point at that. So because when you take a cursory glance at something, you're looking at it. Are you really looking at it? You're taking just a nanosecond to look at that. But if you put your finger on it and look at it and T's and P's are in the green, yes. My RPM is falling, yes. So it's very, very deliberate in the way that I was taught to do those things. And I always remember it was a very tactile experience doing that and just going through the process. And as you're flying the aeroplane, then you can kind of look over and look at that particular thing, point at it, and then come back. And you're flying the aeroplane, you can look and then you can come back. So your instrument scan is fast, but you're making sure that you're not missing something or accidentally missing out on something. I don't know. I think one of the other things that he's missing there is he's aviating, he's navigating, so he's trying to look for a spot to land. He's not going to make the airport. I think he's resided himself to that fact, but he hasn't really communicated that this is an emergency. He just says, oh, my engine's not really, I'm losing power, I pull carb heat, I'm okay. But it's at that point there, you're going to say the awful M word. What do you think? Is he not anticipating that, or doesn't understand the gravity of it? What's missed?
Look, I think fear and as he posted on that video too, the startle effect has really taken over his better judgment, if you like. It'd be interesting to know how many hours of flying this gentleman has. But to me, he's a low-time pilot that's very much not, all those emergency procedures and checks haven't been sort of really instilled into his thinking, because that's where you go to. In these situations, it's all about, okay, what have I been taught? What are my emergency checks and what should I be checking? I mean, the temperatures and pressures, when he noted that temperatures and pressures were in the green, it'd be interesting to see where the tacho was at that point, because with the tacho going that low, pressure would start to decrease. Temperatures would stay in the green because it's not like he's got so much an oil issue. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I want to say a couple of things here. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training that you actually have. And the training that you get as an aviator with the instructor that you've got is kind of the initial piece of training that you have. I believe as an aviator, particularly as a non-professional aviator like myself, I don't fly for a living. So it's my responsibility to continuously study, to continuously debrief myself and read and learn lessons like this, so I don't find myself in these circumstances. And if I did, I've seen it before, because I can't possibly have seen all there is to see as a low-time private pilot when I'm not doing it professionally. And, that's not to say that a commercial pilot's going to see these things either, but it is your responsibility to have that continuous learning and continuous exposure to these things to actually position yourself in a better frame of mind. The other thing that I want to comment on is I just want to say thank you to this fella, and I'll make sure the link is in the description. Make sure you head over to his channel and give him a follow on his channel as well, because to put this out there is being very vulnerable, and he's doing that to share the lessons learned. And, that takes a lot of courage to do that, because finding yourself in these circumstances is not a good thing. So let's keep going.
The other thing too, Rob, is he idented, but he didn't actually put in 7700, which is the Mayday or emergency code.
That's what he's done just now, right? So he put it in there, but he didn't squawk ident, I don't think. So if I just back the video up there a little bit, you can see he put 7.5 in there initially. But then
now he's got 7.7. Yep, I can see that.
He's got 1200. So he put 7.5.
7.5.
He hasn't been hijacked.
You can see his hands are really shaky as well. His adrenaline's definitely kicked in.
Yeah, for sure. My adrenaline's kicked in watching, man.
I have no engine.
My adrenaline's really kicked in when the propeller stopped.
We got guys coming to you. I got
at 1,500 feet, can we just pause that there now? So, in general, when you're 1,500 feet above that, you could sort of, when you practice these in your training, you generally set a standard pattern that you get used to flying. And at 1,500 feet, that's where you would generally be if you have selected your aim point. So you would be a BMAT. So at 1,500 feet, and you can see there in his bottom right-hand corner, there looks like there's a really nice clearing presenting itself. So I think this guy's in with a bit of luck with his location. So
isn't he what?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the airports that we operate from at the end of this, because we wouldn't find ourselves in any such luck.
No. He's definitely in a it appears at this point to have some clear field to be able to sit it down into. So he's right now at 1,350 feet above the deck. So yeah.
It's a bit hard to see his airspeed there because his face keeps covering it, but watch that. He seems to have good control of his airspeed, so he's maintaining that nice approach speed, and he's like at 1,000 feet per minute on descent there.
Roger. I'm looking
so
for a
he's
field
actually
here.
a little fast. There you go. You can see there it's dipping down even further. And that might be him subconsciously looking at his field going, okay, he's obviously formulating a plan in his mind, which is great. And I use the help me mnemonic when I work through teaching forced landing. So H is speed to height, or height to speed, if you like. And then your emergency checks, landing plan, brief the passengers, put out your mayday, and then emergency shutdown checks. So it'd be interesting to see how he goes through following that. So the start of it, he's done no real other than checking the T's and P's, he's done no real emergency checks available. I think he's got his hand firmly gripped onto the throttle, hoping that it might come back alive.
Break the propeller.
Yeah. So that's not going to work in this situation. But yeah.
So this bit here for me is the cringiest bit, and not because of what he's doing, but because of his bank angle, right? So I always remember when I was learning to fly, like no steep turns near the ground. You know, these things are not fighter jets. You can't pull it around the corner. It doesn't have enough power, particularly when you're on finals. When I learned to fly at Bankstown Airport, there's 3 parallel runways there. And usually when you're in the training circuit, you're on the southern side of the aerodrome, and then you have bigger IFR aircraft in the center, and then you have people coming and sometimes arriving on the northern side, but usually departing on the northern side. But just depends on what's going on in airfield operations. But sometimes there's 3 aircraft in the circuit for different things and at different positions in the circuit. And sometimes you would turn onto a base leg before you would turn final, and all 3 aircraft, the middle runway would be on a long final, and the 2 northern and southern side would be pointing head to head at each other like that. So you want to be really careful not to overshoot the center line of the runway. But if you overshoot the center line of the runway, the temptation is actually to pull the aeroplane around the corner a little bit harder with a steeper bank angle. But low speed, got the gear down, got the flaps out, low speed, steep bank angle, that's a recipe for disaster, right? You've got to be so careful right there. And here he is, low speed, low level. You want to be careful not to pull it too far around the corner there. You want to stall.
Yeah, he's only got, though, it looks like he's only got a 30-degree angle of bank. So he's pulling about 1.15 load factor on the aircraft, which does increase your stall speed. But at this stage, with his VSI so low, he's like 1,300 feet per minute. A 172 at 65 knots, or about 65, 67 from memory, is the glide speed of a 172. And you would get somewhere in the order of around sort of 350 to 550 feet per minute rate of descent if you're holding that correct attitude. So at this stage, the 30-degree angle of bank's not an issue in terms of risking the stall because he's actually carrying a bit of airspeed as well. So
that's the thing that I kind of am a little bit cringy with, where if he gets it wrong or misses it, then you've got to pull around the corner a little bit harder, and at that low speed, low level, that's what is risky. And when the first time I watched this, I was like, oh man, is he?
Try to drop in.
But he does a good job of keeping that bank angle nice and gentle.
He does, yes. He's reducing that now. He's about 15 degrees. It looks like he's just taking a stage of flat.
Yeah, so nice and gentle.
I'm going to attempt a landing in a field right now.
117 Tango here, Roger. I notified Charlotte. They got people sending as soon as they can to you.
So just in there, let me just back it up a bit. As he's coming in there on his short final, look at his rate of descent there. So he's nudging 2,000 feet a minute.
It's through the roof. He's and that's, look, I think that's the hard thing when you're looking at forced landings, is that judgment. When do I turn toward the field? And that is very difficult for students to actually grasp. And that's really starting to really understand and know your aircraft. The problem with the Cessna 172 is the buggers doesn't take much to keep them in the air. So this steep angle of descent that he's got, even though he would have full flap at this stage, I believe, and I don't know which model it is that he's flying, but they either have, the newer models have 30 degrees flap, and the older style had 40 degrees of flap. And the 40 degrees, when you put all the flaps completely out, are like barn doors, and you could have steep descent rates as high as that and not let the speed get away on you. But the newer ones, because they wanted to increase the max takeoff weight with 30 degrees angle of bank, still fly quite well with 30 degrees out there. It does take a little bit for them to run out of energy. So it'll be interesting to see how he manages his energy from this point on.
Well, as I look at it there, you can kind of just see where my mouse is there, the airspeed indicator. It looks like the needle is at the very bottom of the white arc, not the top of it. So the bottom of the white arc is you're approaching like 60 knots there, 55, 60 knots. So even though he has that high rate of descent, his airspeed is well under control. And that's where you've got to be super careful near the ground, right? No steep turns near the ground at low speed like that, certainly at that pointing nose down like that as well. Let's see how his landing goes.
As soon as I can see you.
Rounds out nicely.
Yeah. So, and he's holding it off nice as well.
Yeah.
I have touchdown.
Okay, just have a look at his yoke position there.
Yeah.
He's touched down. He obviously wants to stop as soon as possible, right? He should really have that elevator all the way back, creating as much drag as you possibly can to slow you down as quickly as possible. Not only that, what that does is it lightens the load on the nose wheel as well, because that's one of your critical factors in this case is landing in an unprepared field. And if that nose wheel struts, you're more or less guaranteed to have a flip or, create more carnage. So, yeah, having that back pressure on there would certainly, and you can still be applying the brake quite heavily at that point as well, but, trying to minimize the weight on that nose wheel would be, in my view, one of my priorities. And that's a short field landing technique as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool.
One of the keys. I'm just going to let the video keep playing there.
Holy shit.
I'm hoping that video translates the amount of stress. And it's funny because what could I have done different? And I've debriefed this in my mind 100 times since it happened. I didn't use the emergency frequency 121500, but then again, I was talking to towers. So in my mind, I just thought I'm going to stick with that. I didn't say how many souls were on board or how much fuel I thought I had. I didn't say Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. But then again, I was, at the time, I guess, no engine is a pretty good sign that there's an emergency. The first 10 seconds was panic mode. It's almost like this disbelief.
So if you look closely at the gauges there, you can see exactly what's going on.
Two left there, yeah.
Look what's happened here at his RPM as well. It's all the way down at 500.
500.
Like,
yeah, that's just the prop swinging in the breeze. That's not under any power at that point.
Yeah, that's like the startle effect of something like that is big, right? His T's and P's there, like nothing wrong, but look at these gauges here down the bottom. What's going on there? Yeah. Let's just keep playing the video because he talks about it.
Is this really happening? Like, this can't be. I mean, like, how would this even happen to me? I could hear my confident, calm tone begin to shift and change. But after about 10 seconds, I knew I was faced with absolute incredible task saturation within that moment. And the strange thing began to happen because I'm looking around and I'm saying, okay, I know there's a field here because I'm looking this way, neighborhood, power lines, roads, power lines. I had to make a choice, okay? And once I kind of said, okay, this is where I'm going, it was almost like an out-of-body experience in a way, although I was consciously there, and muscle memory kicked in. Speed, that kept going through my head. Maintain speed. That's the most important thing at that moment for me. Obviously, altitude is important, but this is a Cessna 150.
Oh, there you
and go. That means that I have to be very careful flying that in because I certainly didn't want to stall or spin and go right into the ground. But once I decided on the best landing spot, I essentially started turning, went left base, and I just pitched to keep my optimum speed. And I maintained amazing speed on the way down. Once I was turning final and coming down, I began putting a ton of flaps in to slow it down. I transitioned right at the field at a pretty good time, and I just let it fly. And I felt about 1,000 foot was my guesstimate. and I just transitioned, let it kind of fly until it sat down. And once it came to a stop and I realized I lived, I survived this incident, I called my wife first, obviously, and told her what happened and I was okay, and then called my instructor, who was actually waiting on me at the airport and thought I was joking, saying, "Come on, man, where are you? You're late."
That's a 150.
And
that's a 150.
I was like, "I ain't joking, man. This is where I am." So I would love to know your thoughts on this.
So it's an interesting debrief that he takes himself through as well, right? So the debrief is based on his experience and his knowledge and how much flying time he's actually had. And I think he does a really good job here because he's a student pilot and he's trying to figure out and navigate what actually happened to him, and he's trying to rationalize it in his mind as well. And you can only go off the information that you have that's presented to you. He's never had a forced landing before. He's never really been faced with this situation, and he certainly hasn't been, doesn't have the level of experience that he needs to actually remember everything that he needs to remember to make it all smooth and by the book, so to speak. What do you think when you see it? I think he does a pretty good job at debriefing himself and sharing it with the world.
I think it's great, and something I encourage all students to do, not only just insurance, every pilot to debrief themselves after every flight and pull it apart. Look at what you did right, what you could do better, and what you could improve, because there's always something. And as an aviator, I feel that you're always in that, you never stop learning. So what he's been able to do, he's been able to walk away. There's a few things there that I would, if he was my student, we would go out and practice some more. But look, he walked away, and any landing that you can walk away from is a good landing, right, in my view. So
whether that's on the airport or not on the airport, literally.
Yeah, look, as long as you walk away, I think that's the key, right? And
so if you looked at this video objectively, Damo, what would you say that he got right there?
I think he got his field selection right. I think he turned base a little bit too early, but yeah, field selection was really good. As he said in his debrief, that his airspeed he kept and maintained. That was definitely an important one. He didn't overspeed the aircraft, as we could see just on final. That's the most critical part. So he did a lot of things right. But yeah, there's some room for improvement. So
yeah, what did you think he got? What did you think he got wrong?
I think not so much what did he get wrong, but maybe what he could improve on. Definitely working with a checklist. He could, all those emergency checks are supposed to be from memory. They're not actually a handbook item, so you don't actually pull out a checklist for those types of things. They're very much something that needs to be committed to memory. He did some fundamental things in terms of the transponder, but he fixed that. His communications could have been a little bit better, but I prefer to have someone who aviated, and got on the ground safely than did this wonderful communication and mayday call and then screwed it on the landing and perhaps turns into fatality. So that would be my thing. The other thing is rounding out there at the last bit at how he said he held it off. It was a very nice, if that had been an on-port airport landing, that would have been great.
Would have been a greaser.
The idea really is to get the aircraft on the ground as soon as possible so you don't chew up any unwanted runway or field, if you like, behind you. So it's useless once it goes behind you. You need it all in front of you. So putting the wheels on the ground a little bit sooner and a little bit harder as well. But look, at the end of the day, it looks like he wasn't fighting for room. He had plenty of room still in front of him. So, had he done that as a conscious decision and absolutely tried to slow the aircraft down. The other thing I didn't hear from the aircraft, though, was any stall warning device. That's the old 150 and the 172s run on a pneumatic stall warning system, and there was no screeches from the stall horn, if you like, either. So he could have gone down a little bit slower. before he actually touched down. But overall, I think he's here to tell us the story. So that's the amazing and good thing about it all.
Definitely, and I got to say again, once again, folks, just have a look at the link in the description and make sure you head over to his channel and watch the full video and the full debrief there as well. There was one really big glaring thing that he did miss that I thought, and anybody that's been a student pilot, which is everybody that flies an aeroplane, has flown in one of these little bug smashers before, is that you know that if you fly a Cessna, the doors are terrible. And the doors are, I've never been in a Cessna where you pull the door and it closes like the latch works like your car door. You got to kind of open the window, put your hand on it and pull it in. And before you get going, you kind of reach over to the passenger and make sure the door's shut. I don't know about you, Damo, but I've been flying a couple of times and minding my own business at 8,000 feet or something, and the door goes pop. Like, what's going on there? Reach over and shut the door. So one thing that I would have personally had done is, as he was lined up for the final, I would have cracked the door, just in case he did cartwheel the thing or bend the airframe and you can't get out of the stupid thing when it's on fire as well. So that was top of mind for me always. And maybe it's just the airplanes that I learned to fly in.
Look, it's also part of the checklist item. It's to actually unlatch the door, not open the door, but unlatch the door, and that if it does impact, that the door will pop open naturally, not get sort of squashed in place. But that all comes back to, using or having some form of checklist, either physical or from memory. Definitely.
So he goes on to from memory. Definitely. So he goes on to say later in the video, I'm not going to play that whole thing, you can watch that in your own time, is he talks about fuel starvation. So that's actually why he ended up in that circumstance. That's exactly how it happened. And he talks about how he'd flown this flight previously with his instructor with the same everything. And this time round, he had ran out of fuel and he just hadn't paid attention to that. And look, he's a student pilot, mistakes happen. When he's learning to fly, these are not the mistakes that you want to make. And these are the errors that cause fatalities, of course, but he's man enough to admit what has actually happened. So, kudos to him for being able to do that, because it's not a very pleasant experience that he's gone through, but he's gone and put it on the internet and put it out there for the entire world to see. So, there's a lot of lessons to be learnt in that. But he talks about in the video how he'd done that same flight previously with the same fuel load and everything was exactly the same. And so he thought it would be exactly the same when he went out there by himself without his instructor. But for whatever reason, something had changed. There was weather, it took longer to get there was wind or whatever the case may be. He'd made a miscalculation and that had actually happened. So the reason that his engine quit was because he ran out of fuel. And there's not very many videos floating around the internet where you see the end result of fuel starvation. Normally that is read up in an ATSB report or an NTSB report that we're reading about. So it's good that we're seeing this for real and seeing the result of that error.
The questions I have, Rob, is had he done a flight earlier that day, or had he just gone for a solo, like done a dual flight with his instructor, and then the instructor's go out and do this as a solo? Had that been the case, then some of the responsibility does need to come back on the instructor. I feel that your job, whether you're in the aircraft or outside the aircraft, is to try and maintain the safety of your students, and obviously the equipment that you fly as well. So, that'd be interesting to see what actually transpired there. But when you start looking at, the missed items on the checklist, the fuel starvation, there's a kind of a, almost a Swiss cheese effect starting to appear out of the company's organisation. Maybe not so much as a result of what the student pilot, because he's just doing what he's been taught to do, and whether he's getting good instruction, and someone who's really trying to instill these lessons into the students. So it'd be interesting to know a bit more of the background. But fuel starvation is one of those things to me. Is just my mind boggles that it still occurs. I know there are circumstances in which it can occur, but it's the what is it? The 5 Ps. Piss poor planning prevents poor performance. So,
Exactly.
you know, and that's what I put down, particularly on a student flight where there should always be more fuel than they ever should need, and that is an extra layer of safety that you can do, or risk mitigation, if you like. So, if they do run into issues and they are out on a solo, make sure they carry enough fuel if that airport gets closed for whatever reason, that he has enough fuel to make it to the nearest one, and actually brief the student, so make sure he's familiar with the circumstances and the layout of the runway that you would like them to go to. So every student should go out into their solos with a plan B that their instructor has given them advice on. So yeah, I'm a little bit suspect just on a few little things there of the type of instruction. And I don't want to go pointing fingers, of course, but because I don't have the story, but there's some of the questions.
The whole point of this is to debrief it, right, and to figure out exactly where the Swiss cheese model has lined up and has led to this actual thing happening. I know when I learned to fly, Damo, the amount of money that it cost back in the day was more than I could handle on a private infantry soldier's wage when I was paying for my own flying lessons, right? It's expensive. So, you know, I was learning to fly, and one of the things that I figured that could help me would be to, they teach you to chair fly things, right? So that you chair fly the checklist, you chair fly everything to do with the setup, the walk around, all of those things when you're learning. So you go through that in your mind's eye. So when you get there, it becomes really easy for you. But back in the day, Microsoft Flight Simulator was a thing for me because I love playing video games and I love that. And when I got to the nav phase of my training, they gave me where I would go. And I remember asking the instructor, can you draw the lines and point to all the places in New South Wales I'll go to? He did. And I would fly those flights. And I can remember as a flight was coming up for me on the weekend, because that was the only time I could fly, I would have flown that flight 5 or 6 times on my desktop, on my computer. I would have flight planned it every single time from scratch, and I'd be doing it in a 172. So I'd fly the 172 and everything was almost identical there. So I had some reps, right? And when I got to the airport at the other side, I knew how to fly the circuit. I knew where I was going to come in, and I would do that from different angles, from different positions. So I would have to join the circuit, north, south, east, or west is how I would chair fly that with the simulator. So nothing was a surprise to me when I got there. And it was so much easier to have had that preparation. Now, I don't know if other student pilots are going to those sorts of extremes or those sorts of things. I was doing it purely out of a financial motivation, thinking, well, this bloody flight's going to cost me $1,000 to fly from here to here to here to here. You know, I only want to do this one time, and I want to get it right the first time. So I'd go and practice it, and then I'd go and fly it, and I'd be signed off on it and go to the next one. Yeah,
and that's we encourage every student to do that, because we're obviously all well aware of the costs involved, and we know the impact if you come unprepared to a lesson, that generally the outcome might be another lesson. You know, and today's money and cost of aircraft, particularly in Australia, that's a lot of coin. You know, so yeah, being prepared is paramount to a successful flying tuition as well. So it's
the other difficult thing as a student pilot is if you're not sitting in a classroom with a bunch of other student pilots, like going through some formal type training where there's an instructor at the front of the room, you're doing book work at the front half of the day and then flying in the second half of the day. If you're just learning to fly in your spare time because it's something you want to learn how to do, it takes a lot of effort to fit it in and around your life, to actually sit down and to read those books and to do those things. And if you only flight plan yourself periodically here and there, and you're not going through the process for an entire forenoon of flight planning, your skills decay. These skills require practice, and you have to have reps under your belt to actually be efficient at it and be safe at it.
Yeah, look, but there's also methods that you can put in place to sort of pad that a little bit, and that's using a checklist. So if I'm going to plan a flight, what are the items listed? You know, list the items, that you need to work through in order to end up with a flight plan. So, you know, checklists again, even for flight planning, is great, and that just makes sure that you don't miss any items. always keep a flight plan that you've done that you know is correct, with everything in it, and keep it as a historical one that you can refer back to if you get a little bit stuck and think, oh, okay, how do I do that again? So, there's a lot of things that you can do, and every pilot, like I even reflect on my own, when I was a student, I would plan, I would take 4 to 5 hours of planning a private pilot's license nav exercise, on the kitchen table.
And now you get in the airplane and point it that way?
Yeah, well, I do it on the way, and that's part of the thing as a commercial pilot, that you need to be skillful enough that if a customer walks in and goes, I want to go to point A or wherever, that I can be ready within an hour, all flight planned up. And generally, that flight could be a big flight. So if there are many sectors in that flight, you're not going to be able to get that whole flight worked out within an hour. So what you do is you work out your first leg or your first 2 legs, and then you'll work on the next ones as you're flying along. So
yeah, it's an interesting place to be. If you're watching this and listening to this and you've never thought about that before, or you're not a pilot, I'd encourage you to explore that, because it's a huge amount of fun, and you get, I don't know about you, Damo, but I got a huge amount of satisfaction in doing that well. And you're hitting your targets, plus or minus 5 minutes, plus or minus 2 minutes, plus or minus 1 minute of what your expectations are. No GPS, just looking out the window with your compass, your map, and your watch. That's the old school nav that I love to do that. Just deep satisfaction in being able to do the mathematics in your head, to understand exactly what's going on, and to hit that target plus or minus 1 minute of what you said you were going to do.
It's addictive. I think that's something that's probably getting lost in today's flying a lot more with the introduction of electronic flight bags. And GPS, everyone's we are the people of the magenta line now, where everyone, as soon as you get in there, is flight plan, and with modern day autopilots too, it'll climb you, it'll step you down,
top of descent, everything like that. You don't have to calculate any of that
stuff. Yeah, it's
no more 1 in 60s.
No more 1 in 60s, because no one ever gets lost because the GPS keeps them on track.
No more PNRs.
That's another great one. That's a great one too, isn't it? Just a bit of simple maths. What is it? If I'm 1 nautical mile off track in 60, then you're 1 degree off track. So
yeah, the rule of subtension.
So it's and I learned to fly, and you would have too, Rob, because you're an old bugger like me, and I didn't have GPS when I learned to fly. It was, and we didn't even have things like weather apps either. It was very much, we relied purely on NAIPS, which is where we aviators get their weather in Australia, from the NAIPS service. It's a deeply satisfying thing when you go, it's there and it's on time, and it's
I remember reading a story about an F-16 pilot, and one of the roles that he had to learn in his squadron was a bomb toss of a nuclear weapon. And he would say that particular mission, although it's the most morbid thing you could possibly do, was the most deeply satisfying sorties that they would go and fly. And the reason for that was they had to be at the target plus or minus 5 seconds of the timing that they set, for a variety of different reasons, right? So it's never just one jet going out there dropping a bomb. It's a series of jets going out there doing it, but you needed to be there plus or minus 5 seconds of the target. And just to be able to get that level of precision and to be able to do that is a deeply satisfying thing in aviation as well. I remember going through my the commercial component of my license as I was doing that, and learning the how to step down. And I used to, there was a time where I had to go back and forth to Canberra a couple of times, and I used to practice the mathematics in my head with the driver sign. So if I was at 18,000 feet and by the next sign in the next 25 miles, I needed to be at 12,000 feet and I'm flying along at 350 knots, what does my rate of descent need to be to get at that point? And, you know, nowadays you just turn it on the GPS and the GPS will figure it all out for you, right, what your rate of descent is. But doing those calculations in my mind and that aviation mathematics is something that's deeply satisfying and something that I really kind of enjoy to do. And I still enjoy those simple, they're simple calculations, but they're not calculations you use in your day-to-day life. And I think that's why it's satisfying to be able to do that. And every now and then I still do those calculations and go, yeah, I can still do that. It's all good. I don't need a computer. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't know about myself. I've become pretty.
You've got your whiz wheel in your pocket going, what is it again?
Yeah, well, that whiz wheel is amazing. I love that. But it's old school techniques. We're supposed to still teach them. All students still get.
Yeah, they still learn them for sure. Whether or not it's applied. Yeah,
that's the other thing. Yeah.
Let's round out the show with a story, shall we? Have you had a forced landing before? You were telling me about that off air a little bit. Why don't you share that with the audience? What happened? Where were you? And obviously the outcome is favourable because you're sitting here talking to me.
I'm still alive.
I lived. You walked away from that landing.
Oh, I did walk away from that landing. So yeah, I used to teach Air Force cadets their basic training, and we used to do that at Australia's largest Air Force base called Amberley, and we had a crosswind lesson planned with my student in a Piper Tomahawk, and we did an intersection departure off the runway, and we got airborne and everything.
How far up the intersection was it? Halfway?
About halfway, Alpha 2, I think, unless they've changed the taxiways there now. But Alpha 2 was our intersection that we departed from. And then, so I don't know what, it probably had about 1.5 kilometres, I suppose. I think it's about a 3K kilometre length on the runway. Anyway, so we launched off, we were up there, and I'm doing the demonstration of the crosswind, and next minute the engine starts just kind of dying. Didn't completely die. It got to a point of about 1,200 RPM, which is just above idle, essentially, and was forced with a decision to, what do I do?
How high were you when you took off?
I would have been about 150 feet, 150, about 150 feet from memory.
So was there a startle effect for you when you went, what's that? Or
not
did you go,
really. Oh? I remember time kind of felt like it stood still a little bit, and I went through in my head of what I was going to do, and it was something that I was very grateful with my training, and something I teach as well through my instructor, was that sit on your hands in an emergency is what he used to teach. So not literally have to sit on your hands, but just pause for a moment to actually gauge what's happened, and then formulate a response or a decision, and then act that out. So that's what I did. It must have been a matter of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I went, can I maintain level flight? The answer then was no. And then everything sped up from that point. So I grabbed all the flap that I had available to me, pointed the aircraft directly to the nose. Directly pointed the nose of the aircraft to the ground, and flared and landed with about 1 metre of runway available in front of me. So
in the world's longest runway at a Tomahawk, you only had 1 metre of runway left.
That's right, yeah.
That's no good behind you, pal. Next time, no more intersections, yeah?
Yeah. So, yeah, that was, it was an experience, put it that way. But training kicked in. That was my immediate thought. I didn't actually panic at all. I didn't get that startled effect. And the good thing, I guess, too, as an instructor, this is something that we're teaching and training all the time. Like, it's nonstop. Just about every flight we do some form of emergency practice and procedures for our students, whether we're demonstrating it or whether we're getting them to carry it out on their own. It's something that I feel has been beneficial as being an instructor, is that you feel like you've got above average skills, if you like.
Yeah.
And everything's fresh.
Well, you've got more exposure to all of those things, right? Because you're continuously exposing yourself to that, and via your students as well. What about the student when you landed? Were they okay? Did they get a fright? Were they all right about it?
They got it. They got a bit of a fright about it, and we had a good debrief at the end. It was about an hour after once I got back to the flight hut. It kind of kicked in of what just happened, and I actually got a little bit shaky, and you know the adrenaline had sort of started to wear off, I think.
What was on the other side of the threshold there? Was it the runway lights at a big place like Amberley? So if you had have kept going a little bit further, if you had been another 300 or 400 meters down the runway and the engine quit and you had to go and you wouldn't have landed on the runway.
A ditch and then a fence. Yeah, so wouldn't have the aircraft wouldn't have fared too well, and
so you were lucky.
We're very lucky. Yeah, so. And I think that's, for everyone, you can always have the best skills out there, but there is a little bit of luck involved in, walking away from these things safely.
So I've got a bit of a funny story for you as well. It's not in an aeroplane, but it's aviation related. So last year when I went back to go and get my parachute license as well, because I hadn't been jumping for a couple of years, so I had to go and get requalified. I did a hop and pop at 4,000 feet, and I was doing all my training down at Picton Airport. And so Picton is right next to the M5 highway, and then there's a intersection between Picton Road and the M5. So there's this big four-way junction, this massive thing that you can't miss from the sky. So when you get out of the plane at 12 or 13,000 feet, you look down, you can see exactly where you are near the drop zone. So it's really easy to orientate yourself. And when you're down low, it's really easy to orientate yourself as well. So the aeroplane takes off to the north, tracks west, and comes around over the southern part of the airport, and where the wind was, they're getting the people out at low level at 4,000 feet. And there was 3 people that went before me, and then the instructor called me, okay, come on, ready? And he goes, ready, set, go. And I jumped out of the plane, counted, I pulled my parachute, and as soon as my parachute came out, I looked down and I thought, oh my God, I'm on the eastern side of Picton Road. There is no way I'm gonna make it back. So I let go of the toggles and just let the parachute weathercock me to which way the wind was going. So the wind was behind me, but I wasn't traveling along the ground very fast. And a parachute has a forward speed of about 20 kilometers an hour. And all of a sudden, all of the aviation books came back to me. When the aim point that you're looking at is rising up in your window, you're going to land short. When the aim point is going down like this, you're going to be long in that. And I'm looking at the runway at Picton. I'm looking at the bottom right-hand corner of it, and that's my aim point. I'm aiming for that, and I can see it slow. This is happening to me in slow motion, right, at 20 kilometers an hour. It's going like it's going like this in my aim point, up and up. Then I'm thinking, I'm not gonna make it, and I'm looking down in front of me, and I'm going, look at those power lines. Look at that cow. If I'm going to land in that paddock, and then I'm looking at the fence, how am I going to get my parachute over that? I can't climb that fence. Where's the gate? How am I going to get out? And I'm looking up, I'm looking down, looking down, and I see the aim point moving up. And I felt like a bit of a gust, and I grabbed my toggles, and I was at half brakes on my toggles to try and flatten out my angle of attack with the parachute. And as I had half brakes on, I looked and I thought, my aim point's not moving. I'm going to make it across the fence, and I'm going to make it there. And I had to lift up my legs to get over the fence of the aerodrome of Picton, and I flared. As I flared, I touched down on the very right-hand corner of the runway, and the instructors come around the corner of the shed. They're like, "Oh, we didn't think you were going to make it. You're back. Okay, cool. We don't have to go and get you."
Good.
But there was a lot of things happening there that are related to flying small planes as well, particularly as it relates to your aim points and stuff like that. And if you go to an aerodrome you've never been to before, I remember during my training, I went to a couple of places in Western New South Wales. They're these ALAs, and they're grass strips, and I'm used to flying off these big bitumen runways that you can see from miles away, and you've got to be right up close to these bitumen strips, or the grass strips rather, and your navigation has to be spot on to be able to fly the circuit. And you're looking down and going, is that the runway? Is that where they want me to go? And then the runway is like undulating as well. It's not completely flat either as well. And there's a lot of things that are happening there, and a lot of lessons to be learned. That'd be a good conversation to have with you about how to prepare for all of those things and what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love challenging airstrips.
Yeah, I don't like challenging landings with parachutes. That's not much fun.
No, I don't like parachuting, full stop.
It's in the hands of the gods and the weather. But I think it's a funny story, right? And it just kind of reminds you that all of a sudden you fall to the level of training you have. You don't rise to the occasion. There was nothing I could rise to there. All I could do was try and remember exactly what to do with half brakes to reduce the angle of attack, and then look at my aim point going up and down and figure out what to actually do. But there was a startle effect as soon as I got out of the plane and the parachute opened, and I went, oh my God, I'm not going to make it back. And I just let go and let the weather take me. Oh, well. What do I do?
That's
Funny
good.
story. All right, folks, hopefully you got something out of today's show. Don't forget, if you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if you got some feedback on today's forced landings and anything that we went through, we'd love to hear from you. Make sure you click the link in the description below and head over to that fellow's channel, because he's done a really good job of sharing that with the world, and he should be encouraged for doing that as well and being so vulnerable and sharing it as well. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.